Conversation to be having early, and I think to start in a positive place where it's men saying we want to be supportive instead of men feeling attacked and possibly isolated from the conversation. I think what Male Allies does is give them the entree into the conversation that they need, and we do see across that spectrum that men are often interested in supporting but unsure where to start and what kind of things they should be saying and doing to be those male allies. And so that's why I think it's important to train them as early as possible.
This sounds very much like a product of its time. It can only happen at this period of time with this group of people, the millennials. To what extent do you see the same level of enthusiasm from people who are from a different demographic, an older generation, for instance?
Right. I think that they're sensitive and interested in it, and especially because many of those people are in leadership. They're hearing about it. How can we as an organization address this? How can we develop something to share within our entire corporation? But I think what's different about this is that these are young leaders who are moving into an organization, and they're saying very actively, we want a voice in this, and we have something to say, and we want you to listen. So top down is good, but it's not good enough. We want to also see bottom up and side to side conversations.
They see themselves as agents of this process.
Absolutely, absolutely.
What is the next step then? Because eventually these business school men and women will graduate, they will go into jobs or start their own companies. How do you maintain your influence from that point on?
Well, it's interesting because we have seen 3 or 4 years of graduates, and they are starting to reach back to us, and they've said, hey, I'm experiencing X, Y, and Z in the workplace, and I really think what we did in business school could easily apply in the corporate world. So over the last year, we've been collecting data from them, kind of their own experiences. We've done additional research, and we've also been talking to companies, especially if they have some kind of grassroots movement. And I do think that business school, this program is unique to business school, and I don't think you're seeing it as pervasively within a company or in the corporate structure. So these students are still taking the grassroots approach, and they're saying, we think that this is the most effective way to do it. Training is important, and definitely we want our leaders to be bought in, but we think that having that conversation early is what prepares you to be the best business leader.
What kinds of companies are participants, are willing participants here?
It's companies from a lot of different industries. We've seen companies in tech, in consumer packaged goods, in finance, all across the board. There are companies involved in this. Again, it's more the men who are reaching out to us in those industries. It's not necessarily the companies saying, sign us up.
That was my conversation with Elisa Sangster. She's Executive Director of the Forte Fund. Thanks to the Me Too movement, Hollywood is in self-reflection mode about creating a safer work environment for women. There's now a website aggregating reviews from exclusively female critics. Cherry Picks is taking on male-dominated opinion sites like Rotten Tomatoes. In today's Walk the Talk, Bloomberg's ongoing conversation about diversity in the workplace, I sat down with the founder of Cherry Picks, Miranda Bailey, and I began by asking what specific need her business fulfills.
We're kind of cherry picking the female critical voice out of film, television, video games, basically anywhere where there's art criticism and media criticism, so we can have a platform to see what women think about it. In terms of women, it's very complicated because there's not that many of them on Rotten Tomatoes compared to the men. I mean, it's less than a quarter. So in order for us to us being females, to have a voice and know what females think about something, it's really hard when there's an overwhelmingly male, voice shouting at you or saying, this is how it should be.
What are the financial consequences of that gender imbalance among film critics? How does it make its way through the industry?
Well, I don't really know about financial, situation. For me, it's about the consumer. I mean, in Hollywood, we've been talking about we need more women behind the camera. We need more women's stories, more women writers, more women actors, everything like that. And I'm a film producer and actor and director, and it's really easy to say we need it, and it's a lot harder to make it happen because at the end of the day, Hollywood follows the consumers. And if the consumers are being told what is worth their money by a certain group of people that are, kind of narrow, then it's not going to open up. And I felt like, well, maybe if we can open up the critical voice, which is, the gatekeepers essentially telling people what they should buy, what's worth their money, and women actually like these stories and like these filmmakers, then I thought that that would be a faster way to get more women behind the camera and more women's stories told.
How are you funding this website? You mentioned it's going to be an aggregator of reviews, but are you going to be advertising supported, subscription driven in any way?
Yes, I mean, we're funded for the next, 3 years about right now by my production company. And, we will be finding partners once we kind of, get our our voice and our full creative image out there. But yes, I mean, we plan on doing advertising. We plan on doing partnerships with film theaters so that we can, link to buy tickets online. So like if you read a review about The Zookeeper's Wife, for instance, and you really like it, you can go right there and buy it.
It's an interesting time to be launching this because of the Me Too movement across Hollywood, across media overall. How do you intend for this site to help change the culture in movie making?
Oh, well, I mean, the Me Too movement and the Time's Up are two very different movements. I mean, they're both female-centric, but, at the end of the day, we're about, being recognized and respected. And so I'm grateful for those movements. I think it's kind of wonderful that that's happening right now. We've been saying this for a very long time, that we deserve to be paid equally, and not to be, sexually harassed. And, not everyone is sexually harassed, but most all women are definitely underrepresented, underpaid, and disrespected.
You are an independent film producer. As you mentioned, you're an actor, you're a director. What kind of feedback have you gotten from peers in your industry when you told them about Cherry Picks?
I have had overwhelming support from female journalists specifically, which is very exciting for me because this is kind of a new door that I'm opening and learning about. And obviously the female filmmakers that are out there are really excited by it. We're all banding together right now and supporting each other, which I think is great. I think one thing that's awesome about the Time's Up movement is that all of the women who are directing right now are not competing with each other. We're all rooting for each other. And I think that that's a big change. And I think this Cherry Picks is part of that, is us also lifting each other up and opening it up to journalism and the consumers and what the buyers, the exhibitors, the distributors, the producers, the directors, we're all together in this, and we can all make a difference.
Cos Marte went from doing hard time to building hard bodies. He's the founder of Con Body, which is a prison-style boot camp class in New York City that employs former inmates as fitness instructors. In today's Walk the Talk, Bloomberg's ongoing conversation about diversity in the workforce, I sat down with Cos to discuss how he built Con Body from the ground up.
Con Body was derived from my prison experience. I lost 70 pounds in 6 months, and in my prison cell, after doctors told me I could probably die because of my health issues. I was extremely overweight. My cholesterol levels were through the roof, and I lost 70 pounds in 6 months, and then I helped over 20 inmates who was over 1,000 pounds combined. But I took that same programming that I was doing in the prison yard and started doing it and brought it to the streets of New York.
And you began a business, but you told me how you didn't have any startup costs and you funded this yourself. How did that work?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have no overhead. I just went out straight to the park and started running after a woman wearing yoga pants. And I was like, hey, I got a boot camp. And I told her my story and started just attracting people to the park. I was standing on the F train, B train, making announcements. Like, I was nonstop hustling and asking. And I basically took the same skills that I used while I was selling drugs and brought them out legally.
So these are transferable skills.
Exactly.
Your workout's gotten really popular. You now have your own location. Talk about what's involved here and who goes to your workout classes.
Yeah, so what we do is hire formerly incarcerated individuals to teach our fitness classes. So we train the inmates in the system, and we're working on creating a direct pipeline from the inside out. Mostly the people that come to our classes is young professional women. Actually, a lot of people are surprised, but we don't use any equipment. A lot of guys like to, go to the gym and lift 1,000 pounds. My secret sauce is that I work with what I got. So just my body weight, small amount of space, just like I did in my prison cell. And I got that prison body you've always desired.
Now, you hire former inmates, as you mentioned. You're trying to build this pipeline. What do you look for in a potential new hire? And the extent of vetting, talk about that involved in these prospective hires.
I look for people that are charismatic, and when I conduct my interviews, I conduct them like 5:30 in the morning. So if you don't show up or you come in late, too bad. So I really try to make it strict as possible in the beginning, and then I really see if I could hang out with this person, if this person could say hi and bring a smile out of my face, not only me but the customers that are coming through the door, and really breaking down that stereotype, because we have people coming in who's never met anybody who's been incarcerated. What the perceived notion of somebody that's a so-called ex-con is that we're all killers and rapists and the worst of the worst, but the truth is that we're just all human beings that committed a mistake, and we just want to readapt back to society and get a second chance.
Your real message here is about prison reform when it comes down to it. And you kind of came up with your business plan when you were in solitary confinement. You had a lot of time to think about this. You also got some help once you established your workout class after you held it in the park.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the organizations that allowed you to bring together some of your ideas and make it a more scalable business.
Yeah, so when I came home, I tried to take advantage of every nonprofit that you could think of in the prison reform industry. So I went to Fortune Society. From Fortune Society, went to Career Gear, and all these nonprofits were helping me and just trying to get me back on my feet. But there was one program called Defy Ventures. Defy Ventures believes that illegal entrepreneurs have the transferable skills to become legal entrepreneurs. And I did that program. It was a very intense program taught by MBA, Harvard, and Stanford professors. And you graduate and you get a MBA Baylor University certificate when you graduate from the program. So they helped me put my whole business plan together and pay my taxes, and redo it legit.
Talk a little bit about your growth plans, because you're based in the Lower East Side of New York City, but you have some pretty ambitious plans.
Yeah, so I'm in the Lower East Side in the exact same corner where I sold drugs at, where I got in trouble at, and went back into a full circle in that neighborhood. our growth is we want to open nine studios in the next 5 years. I just came out with my book, so Calm Body shows my whole secret sauce in that book. And then also we started this online platform that's coming out in a couple weeks where you could virtually work out with a formerly incarcerated individual. So you basically choose your favorite ex-con for $9 a month, and you get that prison body you've always desired.
Diversity is in fashion. That's according to Eva Chen, who heads up fashion partnerships at Instagram. In today's Walk the Talk, Bloomberg's ongoing conversation about diversity in the workplace, I sat down with Eva Chen at the monthly Cornell Tech at Bloomberg Speaker Series, and I asked Eva how exactly inclusion is showing up on the runways.
The message is you must be inclusive, and you must kind of understand that there are billions of people on this planet, and there's not one look. I think about Instagram and some of the accounts that have done so well on Instagram, and some of the models that are coming out of it, like Ashley Graham or Paloma SLR or Halima. Like, these are women who represent beauty for a lot of different people, and that kind of cookie cutter look. There's not just one standard of beauty, it's 800 million standards of beauty. So I think that's kind of the voice. And now, you think about it, if a fashion show were to cast just one type of model or one type of woman in their runway, and it was every single model looked the same, you would hear about it on Instagram. Like, people will not take that. And I think it's amazing. I think it's powerful. I think everyone can feel represented. And for me, growing up, I remember not seeing anyone who looked like me or looked like us. It just didn't exist. And I think now, if you are a 15-year-old bookworm who loves to read, this is like I'm describing myself, like a bookworm who loves to read, young adult fiction and drink like lemon ginger tea. You know, it's like you can find someone else, and you can find your group of people by following the hashtag Bookstagram. You know, you can find like your kind of like squad, and even if it's a digital squad, you can feel like you have other people to kind of identify with.
How is fashion able to get ahead of the curve of everyone else? Why were they able to figure this out more quickly than others?
I mean, I think in so many ways, like, you know, fashion just kind of, it's supposed to be a little bit prescient. It's supposed to be a little bit ahead of the curve. And also you're able to push the boundaries in fashion. Like, you know, like there are runway shows where people can kind of walk backwards on the runway, or they cast real life models, real life people, which is just like people, revolutionary, you know, like on the runway. And I think that you're able to take risks in fashion, and risks are appreciated.
Some risks don't pay off. I mean, I think of H&M and the controversy over a black child modeling a sweatshirt with the words "coolest monkey in the jungle." That obviously did not work. How is the feedback now from consumers different in the age of social media, where something like that will go viral in a bad way very quickly?
Yeah. I mean, I think that listen, I don't know what the thinking was behind that specific moment, or behind that specific casting, but nowadays it's like the most important thing for corporations and companies is to have representation. Mm-hmm. Make sure that your board of directors is diverse. Make sure that the people who work in the casting department and the creative teams are diverse, because you want to be able to truly represent and truly embody. It's not enough to say, we believe in diversity. You have to have diversity. And that's, I feel very fortunate at Instagram. It's like, it is a diverse team. I love seeing and hearing the different voices and opinions and voices of dissent as well. And that's the thing with Instagram. It's like, people have opinions. You won't always agree with the opinions, but it's important that people voice their opinions. And when people see something that they think is wrong or that is wrong, like they will speak up and speak out.
Right. Do you think fashion brands are nimble enough to respond, or it's because of something like Instagram that provides that instant loop, that feedback loop, they're able to?
I think some companies are. I think it very much depends on the infrastructure of the company. And this is like, I don't know enough about like fashion corporations and infrastructure, but like if you have, I look at Gucci, for instance, and Gucci, you know, they have been known to collaborate with a lot of Instagram influencers and artists. And for the most part, 99% of the time, it's amazing. And there was one season where they did there was something on the runway that was very evocative of Dapper Dan, you know, the renowned kind of like fashion icon. And they were called out for it. And very quickly, they issued a statement saying like, you were right. And now they're collaborating with Dapper Dan and doing a whole collection together. And I think that's in part, their creative director, Alessandro, is incredibly fluent in Instagram. He's on direct messages, reaching out to illustrators, looking for fresh voices. And I think a lot of it depends on the leadership and how, I don't want to say woke, but like how kind of like tuned in they are to what the public consciousness is craving.
So in the early 1990s, you started selling soaps and essential oils on the streets of Harlem and Bed-Stuy to start Sundial Brands. How did you know back then that there would be a market for black hair and skincare products?
Yeah, well, because when we started, first of all, there was nobody producing natural products that were efficacious and that were designed to work on different hair textures and on different skin types. And so what you had was a consumer who desired to have healthier products, natural products, but had no access to anything that actually worked. And so, when you stand on the street corner, people tell you what they want. You better give it to them, otherwise it gets really cold, right? And so we started to take that feedback and started to incorporate that into the things that we were offering. And before you know it, we were selling to other vendors who were bringing feedback from their customers and clients. And so very quickly we got to understand just how underserved women of color were around their hair and their skin.
What has the explosion of the natural hair movement in the U.S. done for your business?
Yeah, as women became more and more empowered or empowering themselves, I should say, to wear their hair natural, to express themselves as freely as they wanted to around the things that were important to them, that really started to drive the adoption of natural hair. And then they actually had products in Shea Moisture that delivered on the promise of what they wanted, right? So I think the two worked hand in hand, and it really took off.
How does Sundial Brands stay authentic as you guys have grown?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we've built our business from day one on a model that we call community commerce. And what community commerce is that a business ought to invest in the community where it does business, right? And it ought to provide not just products to that community, but it also should take the dollars that it takes out of that community and put it back in. And so for us, that meant that the products that we produced from our supply chain in Ghana, of which there are 16,000 women that now supply Shea Moisture, who have now risen above the poverty line because of this model, also get to share in 10% of the revenue of the products that their ingredients go into, right? That then provides them with infrastructural support, warehousing, equipment, training, safety, health insurance, bank accounts. That's the core of what we do this for, and so we continue to do that.
And so in November, Unilever acquired Sundial Brands. What did that deal allow you to do now that you haven't been able to do before?
It enabled us to take, to commit to this $100 million fund. It's called the New Voices Fund for Women of Color, which now allows us to go create other entrepreneurs, or maybe not create, but invest in other entrepreneurs so that they too can have the type of economic opportunities that we've had. So as I said, it's not for one company or two companies alone to be able to compete and to survive and to sustain is not enough. We need thousands, right? So the first thing this allows us to do is to invest there. The second thing that it allows us to do is to scale our community commerce model so that we can go from these 16,000 women to 200,000 to 300,000 women globally. And the third thing that it allows us to do is to compete globally against global corporations. We can't compete for shelf space the same way because we don't have the same resources. We can't buy the same amount of advertising on TV or in magazines or in social media. So we end up shrinking and shrinking and shrinking as more companies come in to serve us as consumers. So what we've got to do is we've got to provide capital to each other in our communities in order to compete. We've got to find ways to scale our business. Now, the way that I've done it may not be the way for everybody else, but at least it shows a path, right? And it shows that it can be done, and it shows that you can do it and be highly successful at doing it. And it also shows that once you do it, you've got to be committed to putting it back in.
In today's Walk the Talk, Bloomberg's conversation about diversity in the workforce, we're putting the spotlight on Goldman Sachs. CEO Lloyd Blankfein is reportedly planning to step down as soon as this year. Diversity will be a top priority for his heir apparent, David Solomon. Solomon recently told the Women in Corporate Leadership Initiative, quote, "You make progress, but the progress as you're looking at it day to day feels slow, and it feels slow because you're a big organization. But you know over time that will change. It's our job to change it." Joining us now to explore this topic is Bloomberg's Jordan Holman. Jordan, we know that Solomon has been pretty active on the diversity front. He did propose a number of ideas to the board not so long ago. Why aren't we seeing an increase of female representatives or executives at the senior level? Because it's not there yet.
Right. No woman has run a major Wall Street bank before. And if David Solomon does become the next CEO, that pattern will continue. So at Goldman, they are looking at increasing the number of women who come into those entry-level positions. But we're not seeing the women come out on the other side of the pipeline on those executive teams. So there is a retention issue, and they are looking at that through mentorship and sponsorship initiatives.
So how long does it take before you get sort of a critical mass of women at senior ranks? I mean, what's the sort of trajectory within Goldman to reach the upper echelons of leadership?
It definitely takes years. You know, you have to groom people. Goldman's a company where they want to hire internal candidates. An internal candidate becomes CEO. So that's why it's important to retain those women that they're bringing in. For example, this summer, they said that they'll have about 40%, mid 40% of women in their junior employee class. And so that's great, but there's only 2 women on their executive team. So now you have to, with this generation, groom them, promote them, have opportunities for them to want to stay on Wall Street.
And that takes time. I think about how Dina Powell, who was once at Goldman Sachs, went to work for the Trump White House, has come back. And there was some tension over her promotion when she returned because she was added to the management committee when her background is not in a profit-generating business.
Right. Her background's in government and philanthropy. And when you're looking for the next CEO, you're looking for those people who've been in positions of profit and loss. And she's not in that. So then when you look at the pool of women who are in that, it gets smaller and smaller. So then when it's time to select your CEO, you have nowhere to turn.
How does Goldman compare to its peers with this?
So Goldman's not alone when it comes to female representation. Citigroup and JP Morgan also have less than a quarter of women on their executive teams. So it's a conversation that needs to happen across all the banks of how do you get your first, female CEO of a large bank.
You recently talked with Goldman Sachs' former HR head, Edith Cooper, who spoke about the bank's efforts to increase diversity, women as well as minorities. What did you learn from her?
So Edith Cooper spoke on a panel last week, and she said that Goldman is looking at the data. They're really trying to be data-driven about their diversity initiatives. So if the data's not saying that they're making progress and change, like Solomon said earlier, it looks slow, then they're going to switch it up. They're going to try new initiatives.
income mutual funds run by women are outperforming funds run by men. So you would think that the number of female managers would be rising, but you'd be wrong. In today's Walk the Talk, Bloomberg's ongoing conversation about diversity in the workplace, I want to bring in Bloomberg's Liz McCormick, who's been crunching the numbers, and the numbers are kind of troubling here. Going back 15 years, Morningstar has found that women-run fixed income funds outperform by a meaningful amount.
Right. I mean, it's very interesting. They said, let's run the numbers and see, is there a performance reason why women are only 10% of the whole business? And they found no. I mean, on fixed income, women slightly outperformed. Even mixed gender teams did better. And on equities, it was fairly close. Women slightly underperformed. So the numbers didn't back it up. They said there's no performance reason why women shouldn't be rising as the number of fund managers.
And in fact, the number of women-run fixed income funds in the U.S. has dropped precipitously. It's now, what, 14 in 2017?
Right. Those exclusively run by women, there's only 14. As of September 2017, that's all there was.
In 2004, it was 47.
Yeah. So it was a big drop, you know, so it doesn't kind of make sense, you know.
So you talk to different people. What do they blame it on, or what do they attribute it to, rather?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I spoke to a lot of the leading fund managers who broke through and said, how'd you do it? What are the problems? A lot of them said, number one, it's very tough because we weren't always welcomed in the beginning, and you don't start as a fund manager. You have to rise to that level, so it's a long haul. And some say by the time you've fought for 30 years or so, some are like leaving and they're had enough. And others are saying young women don't know enough about it. So that's why these organizations like Girls Who Invest are trying to, you know, educate college women. Hey, this is a great field for you and you can perform.
Absolutely. Misconceptions also abound here, and I know this is something that Girls Who Invest is trying to fight as well. The idea that you have to be super quanti to run a fund. It's something that doesn't get communicated very well.
Right, exactly. I think some women think, well, maybe I could, you know, go into sales or banking or something in general, but to run a fund, you have to be just wicked smart and have to be great in math. And of course, those are great skills, but that's not all it requires. And women, it's about managing risk. Like Ann Walsh of Guggenheim said, you know, women are very savvy at managing risk, and that's especially in bonds. That's a big deal, you know?
What was her story? Because she started off on the state pension side, right?
Right, she's amazing. I mean, I said, is this right, this list of all your achievements? Yeah, she started as an accounting degree, said I just happened to go to a pension fund, and then I learned about portfolio management, and then went on to just really work hard, MBA, CFA, law degree, you name it. She had to really stack the decks, but, you know, she achieved.
All the credentials are there, and she got her break.
Yep, for sure.
1990s, Liberian native Richelieu Dennis co-founded Sundial Brands with the goal of creating natural hair and beauty products for consumers of color. In today's Walk the Talk, Bloomberg's ongoing conversation about diversity in the workforce, Jordan Holman sat down with Richelieu to talk about the rise of Sundial.
When we started, there was, first of all, there was nobody producing natural products that were efficacious and that were designed to work on different hair textures and on different skin types. And so what you had was a consumer who desired to have healthier products, natural products, but had no access to anything that actually worked. And so, you know, when you stand on the street corner, people tell you what they want. You better give it to them, otherwise it gets really cold, right? And so we started to take that feedback and started to incorporate that into the things that we were offering. And before you know it, we were selling to other vendors who were bringing feedback from their customers and clients. And so very quickly we got to understand just how underserved women of color were around their hair and their skin.
What has the explosion of the natural hair movement in the U.S. done for your business?
Yeah, as women became more and more empowered or empowering themselves, I should say, to wear their hair natural, to express themselves as freely as they wanted to around the things that were important to them, that really started to drive the adoption of natural hair. And then they actually had products in Shea Moisture that delivered on the promise of what they wanted, right? So I think the two worked hand in hand, and it really took off.
And that was Bloomberg's Jordan Holman speaking with Sundial Brands co-founder Richelieu Dennis. You can get the full interview on Bloomberg.com.
LOTOME stands for Locate, Target, and Message. LOTOME helps advertisers collect and organize their consumer data. So if you can imagine that customers engage on the phone, on the web, in a store, through a coupon, we help collect all of that, attach it to a profile, and activate it. It's the big data story. When I started the company in 2006, I saw this unbelievable opportunity around user-generated content. It changed the paradigm for all advertisers. There had to be a platform to protect the brand and get a defined result, which is a sale. That is the genesis of LOTOME. My first year in business, we landed 9 customers on a proof of concept. I then went to venture capitalists and told them the story. And over time, I was able to raise $60 million. I woke up one day in 2011, I had a board meeting. I called our board together, I told them the trends and the data points I was seeing, and we made a decision to cut the company in half and walk away from a $30 million revenue line of business. We took the company and made a huge pivot. We went from about 100 employees down to 50. There was some overlap of customers, but most of the customers were net new customers that we had to go win around a different line of business. We went from a media business that was charging on a campaign basis to a software as a service business that was charging a monthly fee to manage data. One of the key things that happened during the process was what once was just a desktop experience, meaning your computer, suddenly became a mobile device, a television, an iPad. And that is why we bought a company called Admobius in 2012, simply focused on what was called the device problem. Cross-device. In a privacy-compliant way, we were able to stitch together profiles and audiences no matter how they were engaging with the brand. We've had about 500% growth in customers since 2014. We've 10x'd our employee base over the past 5 years. We're profitable. Developing profitability in a technology company is something I'm super proud of. Over the next 5 years, I would like to be a very large public enterprise. Almost every device and almost everything we're doing is connected to the internet. Microwaves, refrigerators, automobiles. There's information that's thrown off from that device connected to that consumer. I think there's an opportunity for a public company who is only focused on data, data solutions, and activating customer data. In a world where data is everywhere, we help our customers figure out what it all means. And that's the future of LOTOME.
idea for Foley came about in 2009 when I was making a personal shift to a healthier lifestyle generally. And I realized when I was looking into nutrition and fitness that all of these beauty products actually contained a lot of toxins. I realized there was a real opportunity for a clean beauty retail store with all vetted products for safety and performance. Our entire goal is to shift the mindset around the products you apply to your skin. I needed to learn a lot about business and about the beauty industry. I worked on a lavender farm, I worked for a skincare developer, I got a quick MBA at Babson where I focused on the business plan the entire time. In 2013, we opened doors to our first store. I was in there every single day talking to customers, figuring out what this needed to be. I raised a small angel round of $750,000. That lasted us almost 3 years. All the way through to 2016, I was really focused on building a brick and mortar first business. At the same time, there was so much more going on in beauty online than there ever had been. You know, content had become so critical. We decided to make a huge shift in 2016 and change to a digital first business. We decided that digital first was really going to be the only way that we could get the content out there and we could grow fast enough to be able to share our, very unique level of expertise. So we raised a round of $3 million to do that. We needed to build a digital first team. We needed to build a new flexible tech stack. We're very lucky to be in Boston, to be surrounded by a ton of really awesome engineers and folks that are super passionate about mission-driven business as well. We spent a year and a half building it out, figuring out how Foley should exist online. So it'll be between 70 to 80% online by the end of this year. Despite building a digital-first business, you can never truly replicate our in-store experience online. We have 2 brick-and-mortar stores right now, both in Boston. We'll be opening 4 this year, and if everything goes well, we'll open an additional 10 in 2019. We're going to continue growing content and education online in a huge, huge way. I think the real secret sauce to Foley is we're a highly curated portfolio. Since starting the business, we've tested between 800 to 900 brands. We have 75 brands in the store right now. It's not easy to get on our shelves. We don't carry any full brand portfolios. We carry what the best products are by the brand. It's helping in the repeat rates. It's helping in retention. We're now becoming known as the place to really, truly start your clean beauty journey.
mission at Food 52 is to inspire people to eat thoughtfully and live joyfully. We are a comprehensive resource for kitchen and home enthusiasts, and that means that we offer both content and commerce, and then community is a tie that holds it all together. My co-founder, Amanda, and I both come from traditional print media backgrounds. We were editors and writers. In 2008, 2009, we saw this opportunity to create a brand around kitchen and home that lived online. We went out and got a book deal. We got a $100,000 advance, and we actually used that advance to pay for the building of the initial website. In 2009, when we launched, we started really with recipes. Then in 2010, we raised an angel round, a seed round, of $750,000, which we used to invest in building out our own e-commerce platform. E-commerce represents about 60% of our top line revenue, and ad sales is the majority of the rest, with a very small bit being cookbook sales. The majority of our advertising is native advertising and branded content. The events are also a key part of all of our lines of business. We do a lot of events with brands on the ad sales side, and then we have our own events on the commerce side, often pop-ups where we're showcasing our products, which you can typically only buy online. Last year, during Cyber Weekend, we had an outage where the company that calculates our sales tax was down for over 12 hours. So we had just a total backup. What we decided to do was to remove the sales tax functionality completely from the checkout process so that orders could get through, and turn it to our advantage by actually making it a promotion. We followed up with an email the next day, and we said to everyone, we will cover the sales tax through the rest of this weekend. When you have a community that you really are talking so directly with all the time, it enables us to have that sort of direct conversation with people via email, via the site. This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna turn it around to your advantage because you're that important to us. Right now, we are touching 12 million people on a monthly basis. Our unique visitor growth has been 65% over the past year. We're talking to Amazon Alexa about a partnership. Something we talk about all the time is, what does a Food 52 presence look like offline, a permanent brick and mortar presence? We're very close to profitability, and it is really one of our key focuses for the next 18 months is to become a sustainable business.
Sweet Green, we make every single thing from scratch in store every day. The three of us were just, what if we opened this restaurant? It was just solving a problem that we had in our own life. This problem of wanting to eat something that was healthy, affordable, convenient, and really stood for something that we believed in. We started the company by going out to anyone who we could ask, and we raised about $300,000. 40 people contributed to that very first restaurant. That means the average check was somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000. The place we found to open was tiny. And what that did was it really forced us to simplify everything. And that philosophy has really stuck with us throughout the whole history of the company. It wasn't that sales took off in a crazy way right away, but it was like the people who knew about us loved us. Very soon after we opened the first one, we started exploring the idea of a second and a third one. Our first 7 restaurants, we stayed in the DC area. We had these huge ambitions, but we knew we had to get things right before we scaled it. We've had to raise a lot of capital along the way because we build restaurants, but we never really took on any sort of institutional funding or any big investors. It was about 4 years ago, one of our customers and friends approached us about investing a lot more money. It was a guy named Steve Case. He really believed in our mission. That kind of funding allowed us to invest in people, invest in the community, invest in the systems and infrastructure, allowed us to build a brand. We invested in mobile technology and also rebuilt our restaurants in a responsive way. You can pick up your phone or go online and within just a few clicks, order it, have it on a shelf ready, come pick it up and be out of there. That was really hard. It was more than just building an app. Everything had to be redone. The way we operate, our kitchen systems, our prep, everything we did had to be rethought because all of a sudden it went from like one restaurant, one engine to 2. It took us about 2 years to build that technology. I think sometimes the easy way is not the right way. Instead of resisting it, embrace it and figure out a way to do it the right way, not just the cheap or the easy way. Today we're open across the country in 8 cities. So we're in DC, Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York, Boston, Chicago, LA, and the Bay Area. In 2017, we'll end the year with 85 restaurants. For the next 10 years, we're focused on not only just building restaurants, but building technology that can make it easier for customers to interact and eat healthy. We always say we want to meet customers where they are.
The idea for Swell really was I wanted to create a better looking water bottle that would convert people to actually carrying a water bottle everywhere that they went to stop using those plastic water bottles. I started Swell with my own personal savings. I invested $30,000. I worked with a team of industrial engineers. The Swell bottle is triple-walled stainless steel with a layer of copper on the inside. It's almost indestructible. The first year when I started Swell, I went to 17 trade shows myself. I stood in a lot of booths and I talked to a lot of customers. They would tell me, could you make it in this other color? Or could you make it in a bigger size? Because we would like to take wine to the park. Really, that first year was just a learning lab. It's been a real wild ride. We went from 3 million in sales to 10 to 50, 50 to 100, really fast. We are now in 65 countries. One of the challenges that we faced is we outgrew our office. We outgrew our systems. We were running this company at $100 million last year on spreadsheets. We outgrew our website. It mostly kept up unless somebody famous tweeted about us and then everything, came down. For me as a CEO, it was really hard to turn my attention inward. It's been hard for me to not take every marketing opportunity, every sales opportunity, every innovation opportunity. We had to put a lot of things on pause while we built the infrastructure. We're building up the leadership team, we're moving the office, we're moving the warehouse, we're moving the website. We can be $1 billion company because we've got the systems. Last year in 2016, I had the idea to launch a new line for Swell. It's called Sip by Swell. We originally launched in Target stores nationwide. It's a little bit less expensive. It was part of my idea that creates something new for a different type of customer. Our customers love to collect them. We found that the average customer that has a Swell at home has 5.5 bottles at home. Still today, we're a self-funded company and we don't have any outside investors. I don't have a board. I don't have any metrics. I don't have anyone telling me I need to hit any numbers. We might not always be privately owned. We don't necessarily need the capital, but I'm always interested in potential advice and expertise. How could we potentially partner with someone that could help us grow bigger, faster, stronger? I'm not saying that anything's coming, but you never know. I still see people with plastic water bottles. However, I have to say, I think the balance of seeing the plastic versus seeing Swells is starting to change. We still have some education to do, but I'm feeling pretty good about the progress.
Gotham Greens is a commercial-scale urban farming company. We develop and operate high-tech greenhouse facilities for fresh vegetable production in cities. I was working in the field of sustainability and environmental engineering and became fascinated with the technology that was available to be able to grow crops using a small fraction of the resources compared to conventional farming. And at the same time, I really started to recognize the growing trend in the marketplace toward consumers wanting more local and regionally sourced food. So that's really when the light bulb moment went off. We cobbled together some funding and built a 15,000 square foot rooftop greenhouse in the Greenpoint neighborhood of Brooklyn in 2011. We started pitching supermarket chains, restaurants, we started inviting chefs into the greenhouse facility, and within 3 months, we were completely sold out of the produce. And that's when we realized that we were really onto something and we should probably expand. And then a really compelling partnership opportunity came along with Whole Foods Market, which at the time was one of our largest customers. And we crafted an idea to actually design and build a commercial-scale greenhouse into the roofs of one of their new supermarkets in Brooklyn, New York. That was almost double the size of the first one and provided our brand with a lot of visibility. Lo and behold, within a few short months of opening that second greenhouse facility, we were yet again sold out of the produce. So we started looking at Chicago, which is also a city with a thriving food culture and a consumer base that's increasingly demanding high-quality, fresh produce. And that facility is our largest until date, which is about 80,000 square feet or 2 acres. That produces the equivalent of about 50 acres of conventional field farming. This form of farming, which is known as controlled environment agriculture, is really a combination of horticultural science as well as environmental engineering. It was a challenge to find people with this very unique skill set. We conceived of an idea to establish an in-house training program that we now call Gotham Greens University. So we're able to take young graduates out of university or high school vocational programs focused on science and biology and train them to really design these facilities and operate them. Our company has built 4 greenhouse facilities across 2 cities. We have about 160 employees. We've experienced about a 20x growth rate since inception. In our first year of operations, we grew about 500,000 heads of lettuce and leafy greens. And last year, we grew over 20 million heads of lettuce and leafy greens. I believe the future will have us expanding to other cities across the United States, expanding into new products, new product development. Our motto is to be able to harvest and deliver within 24 hours to be able to provide consumers with the freshest possible product and the best tasting product.
Gemmy is a new luxury brand that's providing the customer with the highest quality Italian shoes at prices that have never been historically possible until now. We looked at the luxury marketplace, and there were so many qualities about luxury that were great, but there were some qualities that needed some real reinvention. The incumbents certainly were not reinventing. Shoes happened to be a category that we fell in love with because we love obsession. We want to be a business that occupies a spot, a place in the customer's mind all the time. Shoes create that unique obsession. We think that you've got to be newsworthy. You've got to be different. You've got to have a story to tell. Our consumer knows there's must-see TV every Monday, and it's not about markdowns. It's not about private sales. It's about great new product. We actually don't release that many more products than other traditional retailers do. We just don't do it all at once. The way we describe our company to the consumer is we're old world meets new world. We identified very early on in the business creation a team in Italy that I had some history with that we could, in essence, acqui-hire. There was a group in Italy, in Florence, that had been in the shoe manufacturing business for generations. There was a whole bunch of challenges in taking the old, historical Italian shoe manufacturing industry and putting this new engine on top of it. Unlike most fashion brands that produce things 4 times a year where you have these big spikes, we're providing them with this constant demand, keeping their factories moving all of the time. We had to get them to start producing products at the pace that we wanted them produced. The only way to solve that was to learn. They've done a pretty good job of learning through our data. They've done a pretty good job of learning through our forecasting what opportunities they can receive by moving faster than they've ever moved before. They've been pretty open to listening about ways to improve their demand forecasting and ways to improve their speed of production, but they're not so open to listening to better ways to make shoes, that's for sure. Probably rightly so. We opened our first store in Soho. 80% of those customers who bought in the store first buy their second purchase online. If you're buying things with the frequency that our consumers buying them, the luxury of multi-channel drives to their purchase pattern. 50% of our buyers come back and buy a second time. Once they buy a second time, on average, they average 4 purchases within a year. We're also seeing consistent 100% growth year over year in total sales, and margin continuing to improve in each of those years. So the goal is not go as fast as you can go and grow as fast as you can grow. The goal is, with really good controlled growth, ensure that you can double your business for a number of years.
Fox is an online warehouse club. We cut out the membership fees and we deliver it right to you, generally in 2 days or less with free shipping. I grew up in the suburbs of tropical New Jersey, and then moving into Manhattan later in life, I didn't have a car to get to a warehouse club. And so I thought, how many other folks around the country have that similar problem? And so actually moved back into the burbs to start the company in a small 2-car garage in Central Jersey, tape gun in hand. We went after and tried to solve that problem. In the early days, we actually didn't have a marketing budget. Our marketing budget was virtually zero. It forced us to be creative. It forced us to create a very good service where folks would talk about it. So Hoda and Kathy Lee loved the service. They were both like, genius. Sure enough, they talked about us, and from that moment on, we capitalized on that opportunity, went out and raised our first sizable round of financing, and then moved out of the garage. A gigantic challenge that we had actually came up when we started expanding our footprint throughout the U.S. It kind of forced us to make a decision, are we short-term or are we long-term? Treating people right is actually a short-term detriment, meaning that it's so easy to take away benefits or say, hey, we'll pay minimum wage because you see an instant pop on your financial statements. I don't believe that's a long-term good way to drive the business. We took the long-term approach. No matter if you work in a fulfillment center and it's your first day, or you're the chief marketing officer of the company, we're all one team. We need to treat everyone fairly. In the short run, there might not be a line for increased morale and increased sense of team. But over the long run, I truly believe that will pay huge dividends. To this day, we picked that road and it has become who we are. Folks have chosen to spend their money with us in pretty large amounts because we do the right thing. Now, our fulfillment footprint is 4 locations throughout the United States, 4 fulfillment centers, 3 offices, and a life spent on an airplane for me these days. Last year was our 3rd full year in business, and we went from virtually 0 in our first year to over 9 figures in that 3rd full year. So it's always been a dream of ours, and especially mine, to push the button at the New York Stock Exchange. We've identified an area where there's a real dearth, a real lack of solutions, and for us it's about staying focused, not trying to be the everything store, doing wholesale and doing warehouse clubs and doing it right.
Brit & Co is a new media company that largely reaches millennial women and aims to inspire, inform, and empower them to be more creative. My past is largely out of tech companies. I worked at Google and Apple, and I started realizing the world of digital media was becoming a big trend. I left Google at the age of 25. I was not married yet, and I had saved up enough money to bootstrap my own business for about 6 months. And ultimately, within that 6 months, I made enough traction to raise a seed round, and the rest was history. We have a three-legged stool of revenue. The first is through advertising, and we do primarily native advertising, so branded content as well as experiences and events. We also sell classes online. We have almost 100 courses that women pay for. And then the last leg is through our merchandising business. So one big challenge over the last 12 months has been the notion of whether or not to put our content natively on distributed platforms, ranging from Snapchat to Pinterest to Facebook and Instagram. A lot of the platforms will automatically give you a little bit more reach per their algorithm if you're putting content natively on them. However, they initially had not built monetization tools. So it was a question as to whether we wanted to sacrifice our control over our content and our distribution. I personally believed that the social networks and all of these platforms would get nowhere if they didn't have great high-quality content, and that they would figure out a way to support those people who are providing that content. And that's been paying off. We now reach 125 million uniques a month. We also have 350% growth in revenue bookings year over year. Some of our newer business segments, like our online classes, have grown over 300% year over year as well. We are producing over 100 pieces of content every day and hundreds of videos every month. I think it's so important for a digital brand to have an offline counterpart, especially for any brand that's trying to reach millennials or Gen Z. So we started an event called Remake 4 years ago, just a year into the business. Fast forward to today, it's a 15,000 person festival. It's been doubling in size year over year, which is proof that it's working and that it's only going to go bigger and better from here. We know millennial women, and we want to create content for them no matter where they are and no matter what they're listening to, reading, watching, or generally consuming.
We are a luxury bedding destination that's online only and direct to consumer. The company was started by my wife and I, and we were in the market for new sheets. We just really hated the shopping experience. It wasn't consistent with what we're used to with shopping with apparel or other items online. We first started with some of our savings, I'd say about $20,000 to get the prototypes going, build a website, do a photo shoot. It really went to the bare minimum product. And then we raised a little bit of money from friends and family, about another $100,000 or so. That got us to our Kickstarter, where the goal of the Kickstarter was to finance our first purchase order. Our goal was $50,000 of sales. We ended up selling $230,000 worth of product in the first 30 days with no marketing dollars spent, really just word of mouth. Social media has been really, really important to building the brand and getting the word out. There's some logical people that are in market for our product. People that move into new apartments. Facebook has this data of, an address change. People recently engaged that are doing registries. Pinterest is really, really great for the home decor space. And then there's influencers, that people that really spread the word and advocate for the product. We're very confident that once it gets into someone's hands, that they're gonna love it. We didn't take any funding until very recently, and we bootstrapped the whole thing, so we had to sell to buy. We would sell all of our inventory, use that money, and roll it over to buy more inventory and more and more. And that created problems of like this up and down, up and down, up and down. It's very hard to get momentum in the wheels turning when that happens. It's planning ahead, getting ahead of your inventory, getting ahead of the demands, just to make sure that you have enough to facilitate the growth. It seems simple, but it's super complicated, the forecasting element that we've gotten much better at. And that's one of the biggest challenges to any consumer products business in year 1 or 2. Our first year of sales was about $250,000. It was mostly the Kickstarter. Year 2 was 10x growth. We broke 20 million in sales last year, so it was another 10x, and now we're on pace to more than double that yet again this year. 5 years down the road, who knows? We might be, the biggest, bedding home goods company in the world. We might get acquired by a bigger company that's looking to get a closer relationship with the customers. Once we feel like the bedding category, like we've really mined everything that's there that we could, then there's opportunity to move on to other categories that supplement it in the home space as well. But we're not ready for that. There's a lot more to do where we are right now.
Dia & Co is a personalized online shopping service for women who wear sizes 14 and above. Plus-size women in the U.S. make up about 67% of the population in the U.S. and pretty shockingly make up only 17% of apparel spend in the U.S. Dia was founded on the simple mission of really creating equality for her as a customer and therefore really bringing her to the table for the first time within fashion. One of the things that was very clear for our customer was she was as underserved in retail as she was in media. And what that meant was that discovery channels were actually quite challenging. The one group of people who had meaningful sway and were truly, in a way, the gatekeepers of the plus-size community were the bloggers. And bloggers became our earliest advocates. From there, we benefited from word of mouth and the power of a positive experience, and we've kind of grown from there. We very quickly realized that we had this growing, avid, excited customer base and a distribution network that was working. And where we were having the biggest trouble was in finding really great supply. We're based in New York City, and we would literally scour Manhattan to find the best merchandise in our customer sizes to send. Eventually, we were able to work with a group of designers that agreed to partnering with us to expand what they were offering. So we've worked with some of the best design and product development teams in the industry to develop 8 brands that are exclusively at Dia, and those brands, in a lot of ways, make up the backbone of the service. We recently elevated the call that we were making to brands by taking out a full-page ad in the New York Times on the first day of Fashion Week, really calling on brands to step up. The conversation around inclusivity in fashion is one that is had often, but what we haven't seen yet is an actual move from speaking about inclusivity to actually producing the garments that women can wear. And that's a role that we can play, that we feel a responsibility to play, and that we're very excited to play for our customers. The core of our product is understanding our customer as well as is possible. We serve women who are very early in their style journey and some who are much farther along in terms of understanding what they like and what they don't like. And the goal of the service is to really meet her where she is. And it really becomes an iterative relationship where we're showing her product, she's giving us feedback, we're showing her better product, she's giving us feedback, and over time, we get to know her incredibly well. Our mission at Dia is to be the beloved brand of plus-size women.
start Warby Parker with $120,000. That enabled us to build a website, get some PR support, and purchase our initial inventory of frames. I remember launch really vividly. It was February 2010. We made it live February 15th. We didn't tell our friends or family because we didn't know the website would work. Immediately, the orders started pouring in. We hit our first year sales targets in 3 weeks, sold out of our top 15 styles in 4 weeks, and accumulated a wait list of over 20,000 people. We had to start cutting class because we were full-time students at Wharton at the time, getting our MBAs. It was really crisis management. We had orders coming in. We actually didn't have enough inventory to fulfill those orders. We had to think about a communication strategy, a customer service policy. We would just profusely apologize, but also explain to people what was going on. We just launched. We didn't expect to have this much demand. And when you tell people the details, they can have patience and they can understand and sympathize. Brands build relationships with customers much like human beings build relationships with other human beings, and that's through vulnerability. Our first store was actually my apartment. We laid out the glasses on the dining room table, and that was our first foray into learning about the bricks and mortar world. So we did a pop-up. We bought an old yellow school bus, ripped out the interior, and turned it into a mobile store. Went to over 15 cities across the country. In each city, we would be in roughly 3 locations, so we could tell you which intersection performed best for us. So suddenly we had a roadmap for where to open stores. We now have 46 stores across the country. It's really been an important part of Warby Parker's growth. We founded Warby Parker to create a company that would do good in the world. At the very beginning, we committed to distribute a pair of glasses for every pair that we've sold, and we've now distributed several million pairs of glasses to people around the world. We've always believed in aggressive but sustainable growth. There's this mentality of move fast and break things. We believe in moving fast, but move fast deliberately, and when you break things, let's make sure it's not catastrophic. By staying focused and reducing complexity as much as possible, you can actually grow faster, longer. We're trying to build a company that's going to be around for the next 100 years.
thank you very much for coming here.
Thanks for having me.
I've always been relieved ever since you were appointed, because at least until your appointment, I seem to have the most unpronounceable name. But now we will keep it as Dara and John. This conference is called The Year Ahead, but in your case, you are close to 6 months into the job. And I wondered what you saw in terms of the year ahead at Uber as your biggest challenge. What's the thing that you think about most when it comes to 2018?
We definitely have our share of challenges at Uber. And for me, where I want to get Uber to the year ahead is a year of normalcy. 2017 was, I think, will go down as one of the most difficult years for any company out there. And I have to give credit to the Uber team and the employees there. It is a group of true believers who believe in our mission, who believe in mobility as a service being available to consumers everywhere at a reasonable cost. And what my job in 2018 is to get rid of the distractions and get the company back to business, get the company back to normalcy. There's a lot that we've done in the past 6 months as far as bringing new investors, driving a new culture and norms where doing the right thing, period, comes first, bringing a new management team, et cetera. There's a lot that we've gotten done, but this is a company that knows how to execute. This is a service. Mobility as a service is something that's universal, that's needed in the world. And I just want to get back to doing business.
It's quite interesting. You said true believers.
Yeah.
Normally, true believers are the last possible people where you're able to change a culture. Can you explain a bit about that?
Well, I think that they understand that mobility as a service, bringing the cost of transportation down, making transportation services available to anyone and everyone on a local basis, and partnering with cities to be a solution to traffic, to pollution, et cetera. That is a mission that they all believe in. And I think that they, having seen what happened in 2017, to some extent the crisis, the enormous crisis that the company has gone through, is a benefit, because everybody at the company knows now that we need to change, that we need to break with the past as far as the way the company was run. We need to go from growth at any cost to responsible growth and growth in partnership with other players out there. That's clear, but now I've got to kind of get the company down to the normalcy of execution, of building great technology, and I think we're going to get there. It's still some tough sledding early on, but I absolutely think we're going to get there.
When you talk about execution, is profits one of the things you want to get? I think you lost $4 billion last year.
Well,
peanuts by the standards of
profits would help. So at some point, we absolutely have to become profitable, and that's part of the plan.
Do you have a kind of goal for that? Do you think you should be profitable by 2022 or by 2020?
I think that we'll be profitable before 2022. This is the business itself.
Do you want to come back a bit closer, 2020?
Yeah, listen, it's not going to, I don't want to name a specific year, but this is a business that the core business, the ride-sharing business, can be profitable within 3 years. We will continue to make very aggressive investments in building out autonomy, because we think that's a terrific opportunity for building out new technologies such as Uber Elevate, where near-term profitability is not a goal, but long-term growth is. So we will look to balance near-term profitability, but as a company, we will always be a company that makes big, bold bets and takes big risks.
To what extent, though, do you think that drive to become profitable fights against a little bit of this culture change? If you want to make, you talked about making money, but not at all costs. Do those two things spar against each other?
I don't think that profitability and culture are their issue. It's the company in the past was willing to make trade-offs as it related to how it did business, and I think was guilty of hubris, was guilty of thinking that they knew better than others, and I think that what we know now clearly is that breakneck growth can hide cultural issues, that there are no excuses for not doing the right thing, and that you do have to make trade-offs. And as a management team, we're specifically talking about those trade-offs that you have to make. We have to be a little more patient sometimes, because working with governments, regulators, et cetera, sometimes takes longer, but in the end, you build a more lasting business. And so maybe what we went through was necessary, but we're here. We can control our actions from this moment onwards, and I think everyone at Uber from this moment onwards wants to build a great company, not only in terms of growth, but in terms of the kind of company anyone would want to work at.
Can I ask you one thing which you have got a sort of hangover from last year, which is all the regulatory problems, and particularly all the cases against you? I think there are 6 criminal probes or whatever going on.
The lawyers are lining up outside the door.
Which one do you sort of think? Which one do you fear most? I suppose, out of these different things.
Listen, I think that all of them are serious issues, and my response is that we're going to be transparent, and we're going to take responsibility for our actions in the past. I do think that there are certain circumstances where there was smoke but no fire. And I think as a company, we have to defend ourselves and work within kind of the appropriate frameworks. And my goal is just to get beyond this stuff.
But some of these things like pricing policies, surely they go right to the heart of what Uber is, or am I wrong about that?
Yeah, I think they do, but I think that there's a way of being smart but transparent at the same time, and that's where we've got to take the company.
Take me through governments. When you talk to governments privately, do they talk any differently than they do publicly?
Governments?
Yes, governments.
I think that they are honestly a bit relieved with how we are engaging with them, because I think that the engagement is now real. I think they feel like we're out there, we're genuine because we've learned our lessons of the past, and I do think that we can take, for example, the data that we have in terms of traffic and in terms of movement of our drivers and riders, and we can use that data to partner up with cities in order to solve congestion issues, because congestion doesn't help anyone. It wastes enormous amounts of time for consumers. It hurts the environment. And I think that we are aligned with cities, for example, to partner with them in a fundamental way to solve these problems. And I do think that when these are conversations that a number of regulators and cities have wanted to have with us for many years, and I think we are really engaging with them at a depth that I think is going to create a real win-win going forward.
Do you think you were too confrontational on this before?
Yeah, I do. I think that the company was pushing growth. And listen, any innovator, to some extent, the innovation is about questioning past kind of present practices. It's about breaking things, the Facebook breaking things. We just went a step and a half too far. And what I want to keep, hopefully, is the best of both worlds, which is this spirit of innovation, the spirit of can-do, et cetera, but the responsibility of partnership. We don't know better than you. We're actually going to work with you, of actually having dialogue and respect for our city partners, for regulators, and then continuing to take risks and continuing to do daring things. And I think we can accomplish that.
Imagine this audience here is a collection of mayors or a collection of city officials, and you want to depict, this is the Year Ahead conference, depict what the years ahead in this thing are going to be like. How far is driverless cars going to go? You talked just a few days ago about the idea of there being flying cars in 10 years' time. Can you just give a description of what you think transport is going to look like?
Well, I think that we think there are 3 keys to transport and where the industry is going: autonomous, electric, and shared. And I think all 3 are necessary in order to get to the next level of city planning, et cetera. There are many cities where up to a fifth of the space taken in these cities is taken by parking and storing these cars. And so I do think that you need autonomous, you need electric, and you need shared. And I do think it's going to take some time. True autonomy for every single use case is some ways away. What we bring to bear is our developing autonomy, and we will have autonomous cars on the road, I believe, within the next 18 months, not as a kind of a test case, but as a real case out there. And over a period of time, we're going to bring autonomous transportation and feather it in with the non-autonomous transportation with drivers.
What does feathering in mean?
Feathering in
mean to a
means
layman like me?
Crashing. Yeah, feathering in means if you're, for example, in Phoenix, and you make a request to go from A to B, which is what you do with Uber, there will be 95% of cases where we may not have everything mapped perfectly, or the weather may not be the right weather, or there may be an accident on the road, or you may not have 2 or 3 ways of getting from A to B, where you may say, you know what, that's not an autonomous use case. We're going to send a driver to pick that person up. For 5% of cases, everything is going to fall into place. And we will send an autonomous car. The user will be able to pick, do you want, there's an autonomous car, yes or no? And we'll be able to service that A for B. That 5% is going to go to 10 and 15 and 20 as our computers and our algorithms learn more and more about what it takes to drive in a city in a real life situation. And every minute of every day, that driver, that computer is going to get better and know Phoenix better and better and better. And in 5 years, we'll have the perfect driver in Phoenix. We will have to retrain that driver in every single city. We're going to have to build out 3D maps of these cities. And it will take time, but over a period of time, you essentially have a driver who becomes the perfect driver. It'll take 10 to 15 years, but that's the feathering in that I'm talking about.
Will a child born today, will they ever need to learn how to drive?
A child born today? No, I don't think so.
So within sort of 20 years from now, we will...
I don't think so. Listen, I hear some groans.
And also,
I heard a couple of groans. 1.3 million people die from car crashes every year. 1.3 million people die from car crashes every year. That doesn't count an estimated 20 to 50 million people that are injured. Okay, this is actually a public safety issue. If you look at cars, 96% of cars, 96% of time, cars are sitting there not being used. It is a huge amount of pollution that's caused by these cars being in the road, and a huge amount of wasted time. So the safety is there. Electrification is absolutely key, and sharing these platforms is going to allow us to be much safer and also put our assets where they add value.
But it's quite interesting because when you first came in, I remember you sounding somewhat more skeptical about self-driving cars. You've been converted. Is that a?
The choir has spoken, and I'm listening. It's pretty exciting technology out there. But again, it will be a hybrid technology for some period of time.
What about flying cars? That came as a slight surprise.
Yes, that's a great project that we're working on. It's called Uber Elevate. And it is actually about battery technology.
It would have helped a lot of people here.
I know. I wish that I was available. We'll launch it here if we can. But battery technology is allowing us to have multiple rotors on planes, or helicopters, if you want to call them that. These rotors that are much smaller will be much quieter than helicopters are. Much quieter, much safer. If you add sharing into the equation, you can actually get the economics of going from A to B. We think within 5 to 7 years to a place where normal people would think about taking these flying cars. That'll be the beginning, and then it's about scaling. And we're working with a number of partners right now.
Do you think the regulation on flying cars, I've heard some proponents of it argue that it might be easier than it has been on driverless cars, because driverless cars, you have to deal with existing roads, existing everything. Flying cars, essentially, you're going into unconquered space.
I think that mayors that are forward-thinking understand that traffic and pollution are a real issue, and I think flying cars can be a significant solution to traffic issues in cities. And these cars, to start with, they're going to be very specific. They'll be kind of highways in the air. There'll be very specific routes that these flying cars go on. They're not going to be able to take you to your backyard and land in your backyard. There'll be these skyports. So there'll be very specific routes that you go on. And I think if you build a regulatory framework that has that kind of structure around it, I think you get to a better solve.
Can I drag you back somewhat reluctantly back to the real world? But you have Rajiv Misra, who came in with you from SoftBank.
Yes.
He's going to become a director. Last week, he said that Uber should focus on repairing its market share in the US and on key European markets rather than going to new ones. Do you agree with that? Is that the way you look at Uber?
I think one of the fundamental strengths of Uber is the global scope that we have. This is
You
a
had
brand.
that motto, everywhere. What's it? Everywhere for everyone.
Yeah, everywhere for
Do you want to
everyone.
make it some places for some people?
No, we like the everywhere for everyone. It's much sexier than some places for some people. That's
telling me.
Just not interesting. I do think seriously though that the global scope that our company brings is important. Our being able to build technology that we can amortize essentially everywhere in the world is hard, but it is part of the fundamental value that we introduce. So I would look at Uber very much as a global brand. That said, we're going to look at all opportunities, but at this point we are leaning forward. In 2018 for us is going to be very much a lean forward year for the company.
But without, I'm not trying to create new boardroom tension at Uber, but that would appear that SoftBank is keener on a more limited idea, whilst you're keener on everywhere for everyone.
Well, listen, SoftBank is a very important shareholder. They're our largest shareholder, and many of our shareholders have opinions over what's the right thing to do. Ultimately, the governance of the company is going to be at the board, and we'll have those discussions at the board, and we'll set our long-term strategy, and then execute on it.
One of the things which Uber played, perhaps not very fortunately, a role in was the whole sexual harassment questions and everything to do with that. I suppose one very obvious question, do you think that you have solved that part of the culture? But secondly, do you think that this is a real revolution and it's going to stick?
I think that what was happening at Uber was serious, and I think that while what Uber went through was difficult, I think the Susan Fowler blog was probably one of the best things that happened for Uber, and it certainly started a movement that's an incredibly important movement of the company. I'd be reticent to say that it's solved.
Yeah.
But it's not an endemic issue within the culture of the company, and I think the company has learned, and I think the company took very harsh and appropriate steps to make sure that kind of behavior is absolutely clear, that kind of behavior is not accepted in any way, shape, or form of the company, regardless of where you are, regardless of if you're a great performer or not. So I think we're at the right place for Uber as a company, but I think in general, we're not where we need to be in terms of women in senior positions, making sure that we're welcoming of women in technology, and we help women really build their careers within our company. There's a great kind of bottoms-up energy there, but we're not where we need to be, and we have a lot of work ahead of us.
On the issue of, you talked about the top performers, is that looking back, and also I suppose looking forward for many of the people in this room, because there are a lot of people's businesses which have been affected by this. If you had to give lessons to other people who are now looking at this issue, perhaps more seriously than they have done before, is the really bad issue, and I suppose I'm thinking some ways about the media industry in this, is that giving top performers more room for maneuver or whatever than people, or more discretion than people thought? Is that top performers need to be treated the same as everybody else?
I think they absolutely need to be held accountable. One of the really valuable lessons that I got early in my life was actually through Jack Welch, and he said, it's very tempting to allow top performers to misbehave in any way, but for me, he was talking about being aligned with the CEO. Sometimes you allow top performers the tendency is, well, let them get away with some kind of behavior that is not the right behavior because they're so good. And what Jack told me very early on is that it's the top performers who are problematic culturally that are the most dangerous because they have followership within the company because people look up to them. So he's like the dumb person who is bad culturally. He's not the problem because everyone says, well, that's a dumb person, so who cares? It's the smart person who has followership. So it is incredibly important for the top performers to actually be held to account more radically than anyone else because they're the ones who have followership at the company and they have to set the example. So for me personally, that has absolutely guided how I've managed. Expedia was a company that had, excellent cultural values. And one of the first things we did at Uber was to go out and reset our cultural values, and we call them norms because to me, it's not just these values that you put on the wall and kind of people stare at and it's all nice. It's about behavior. And we set out to change behavior at Uber, and I think that the company was thirsting for it, and we are starting on a path, and I believe it's going to be a positive path.
An inevitable question, I hope you won't regard it as a cheap shot, but you talked about smart people who have followers throughout a company. I mean, Travis would seem to be the epitome of that sort of figure. Do you think of him as being in that category of people that Jack Welch was talking about?
I think, listen, Travis was the CEO of the company, and he had incredible followership, and he was held to account, right? I mean, he's no longer the CEO of the company, and he's a board member. He's a big investor, and so he's absolutely going to play a part on the board. But we've also been very clear as a company that we do have to make a break with the past, with how we behaved as a company, and to some extent with the new CEO being a very different kind of a CEO. So in the end, you have to be held accountable, and I think that Travis was held accountable, and at this point, he's a board member and a constructive one at that.
If you look around the world now, where do you see the next competitors to Uber? You've obviously got Lyft breathing down your neck.
Yes.
Where else do they come from?
Well, I think that as you move into a world of autonomy, the position of the car manufacturers, the position of, for example, Google, who's developing Waymo and Waymo autonomous technology, you're going to get a lot of players interested in this space. And a lot of people think about Uber and ride sharing as a significant enterprise, and it is. But the fact is that we account for less than 1% of miles driven on the road now. When autonomy comes in, that number over the next 10 years is going to be closer, I believe, to 15 to 20%. So because we're not yet a true alternative to car ownership, and I believe that as you bring autonomous and you bring the price of mobility down and make it available to everybody, everywhere, then we become a real alternative to car ownership, and that really opens up the market for us, but it also opens us up to many more competitors.
And is Google at the forefront of those competitors at the moment?
Google is one of many. I think that they've developed very strong autonomous technology, but what we think, which is exceptional, is having autonomous technology and the network under one roof, which allows us to use autonomous in a very practical way, nearer than you think.
There's an inherent attraction to light and being human. And I think on a very deep psychological level, light is this way in which we experience the energy surrounding us in a very personal manner. My name is Matt Dilling. I'm the founder of Light Bright Neon Studio, and we manufacture, produce, and restore neon works of art and design. Origins of the creative content of a lot of the work at Light Bright comes from a variety of sources. Sometimes people come with a napkin sketch, some people come with an Adobe Illustrator file, and we have a whole design team who then we kind of work together to help create layouts of what it might look like. Scale it up and create a paper template using a pen plotter. And that paper template actually becomes our guide for what we're going to bend the neon to. We take from the office into the glass shop. We pick out the right size tubing with the right color for the right size project. From there, we heat up the glass tubing. The torches heat the glass well in excess of 1,000 degrees in order for it to get into its molten state. We heat up and bend the glass tubing to match the template. One of our chandeliers has over 100 different bends in it. So each one of those bends has to be marked for a heated up bend. We also have to allow the glass to cool between the bends so that the next area can be worked on and heated up in its own unique fashion. It turns into spaghetti, and then we have to make sure that that spaghetti lines back up and cools to the template. We use a blow hose to connect our mouth to the tube, create a volume that's closed, and we can control the pressure in there with our mouth. There's just a variety of challenges that come up inherently in working with glass. Glass can crack due to stress, and sometimes you'll just have a batch that all it wants to do when it gets near a torch is crack. After we've bent various components, we have to go in using the crossfire or the hand torch and actually weld all of those pieces together. The last step on that is then to weld on electrodes onto either end. Each one of those steps is very, very specific. I draw inspiration from so many different experiences. It's hard to come up with one thing that's particular, but one of the ways that I really am able to connect with the creative is to float. Floating is a similar experience to meditation, to psychedelics. Going into a blackened room and laying out in a body of water and salt that's heated to your body temperature, and it allows for all sort of external stimulation to fall away. And your internal world really begins to bubble up and manifest. You really get to experience a different relationship to your mind. I work with neon because I can't not work with it. It's so challenging and so rewarding. And those things are so intertwined that there's no way of separating it out. I learn so much and continue to learn so much by working with it. I find so much inspiration in working with it, and I just continue to experience new and different things through the medium. It's that close to me at this point. Once the neon tube is completed, we have to hook it up to our manifold for bombarding. The manifold is opened, a vacuum is drawn. We check the tube for leaks with our Tesla coil. We close the tube back off, and we heat it up using a very large and powerful transformer. As the tube is heated up, it releases anything that's not inert inside the tube, and we evacuate that out. We introduce the gas into it. and we seal the tube off, sealing into that tube whatever gas we introduced into it. I think my favorite part of making a neon light is when I see it lit up for the first time. Different gases, when electrified, emit different wavelengths of light. Neon gas is this very bright orange, fiery red color. Argon gas creates a very intense blue, but that light output that is produced can then be expressed in a different wavelength by coating the inside of the tubes with a phosphor coating that takes that one wavelength of light and emits a different wavelength. We bring it over to the aging table where we hook it up to an age-in transformer and allow it to settle, age the gas in that we've introduced to it. There's always a stray particle of something left inside the tube. But that time that the oxide coating can act to scrub whatever is left inside the tube while things are getting settled into place. Once the tubes are aged in, we move on to our process of assembling two halves of the fixture together in a jig, gluing up the center of the fixture to its spindle. Once the adhesive dried, we would connect the wires from the fixture together into a transformer, and we turn on power and it lights up. Part of what we love about what we do here is that we try and put out into the world the kind of things that we'd like to see. I still am surprised when it lights up. I'm still excited when I get to see it illuminated. There's an ineffable quality to it. To me, is this insight into the inner workings of the universe. It literally is. It's a way of looking at what is surrounding us in the cosmos in a new light.
You're watching the best of Bloomberg Daybreak Middle East, the major stories driving headlines this week. Mega merger. Saudi's largest lender, National Commercial Bank, is buying rival Sama Financial Group for $15 billion in the biggest banking takeover this year. Moody's warns that Saudi Arabia may not be able to rely on Aramco's huge dividends beyond next year unless oil prices increase. How will the kingdom contain its fiscal deficit? And the Bank of Israel says it will continue to take whatever accommodative measures are needed to support the economy. That after the country went into a second lockdown last month. We hear from the governor, Amir Yaron. First, National Commercial Bank, Saudi Arabia's largest lender by assets, this week agreed to buy rival Sama Financial Group for $15 billion, the biggest banking takeover this year. Now, we got more details with our markets and equities reporter, Felipe Pacheco.
That's a very, very significant deal for Saudi Arabia and, of course, for all of the Middle East banking industry. NCB agreed to pay 28.45 riyals for each of Samba shares that they are buying right now. That represents basically a 3.5 premium to the closing price for Samba shares yesterday, Youssef. So we should see a reaction in the market today. Stocks should definitely trade closer to this mark. That will be the final price paid in the deal. If we look at the new bank, it will have assets of more than $220 billion. It will be the third largest bank in the Gulf, if we compare to all of the GCC countries. Of course, the PIF, the Saudi Sovereign Fund, will be the largest shareholder with about 37% of the full entity. And if we look again in the combined entity after everything is settled down, everything is done, synergies might boost earnings per share by about 5% at least. And that's according to the calculation of Bloomberg Intelligence analyst Edmund Christo. The final terms for the deal and the complete of the merger is expected for the first half of next year, Youssef.
We then got reaction to the merger news from Mohammed Ali Yassin, the Chief Strategy Officer at Al Dhabi Capital.
I think really Saudi Arabia banking sector is going to become a winner because based on the last numbers closing of market cap, the merged entity will be bigger than QNB. So maybe it's third in assets, but it is first in market cap, and that's important for inflows. We also think that usually when you have these such big mergers like these, the savings from costs over the years, which is expected to be around 800 million over the first maybe 1 or 2 years where they do it, it's about 9% saving, is usually, we think it's understated. I think we think that could be beaten upwards, and therefore you're going to create the biggest corporate bank in Saudi and the second biggest retail. So I think overall for Saudi Arabia, if this succeeds, really they can really cement their position other than they're the biggest economy in the region and the biggest stock market, and now they have the biggest bank in the region if QNB does not beat them back.
What's going to keep the Tadawul in positive territory? It is the only equity market with year-to-date gains. I mean, the rest of the region is pretty much in the red. Is it going to be this deal, or is it going to be another sector that you would say, you know what, that's going to be where the catch-up trade is?
Honestly, it really has been surprising. If you looked into most of the analysis, we were looking, especially with the COVID, what happened towards the end of March and what happened with the oil prices then, everybody was pessimistic. We saw the VAT increase in Saudi. We were very pessimistic on the effect. But really now, Saudi is the only market in the green year to date. And I think one of the main reasons for what had happened is, one is there's a huge retail liquidity that was sitting on the sideline. Maybe increasing the VAT was a blessing in disguise, where people decided to put their money into stock market, take the risk instead of paying it in taxes or in expenses. That's one. And two, the IPOs that came in the Saudi market, which continued this year, whether like Salman Habib, whether it is now we have Bin Dawood, whether what's coming in the pipeline, the Aramco last year, and I think all of these have really helped the market to really push up, because there is the investment, if you want, opportunities for the Saudi retail investor has minimized, and they all focus on the stock market. Will that continue going forward? That would be interesting. I think if oil prices continue to maintain the current range, we hope they are in the between, above 40 and within the the 45 to 47 range. We think that could be maintained for the rest of the year.
What are you telling clients about preparing their portfolios for the U.S. election? I'm talking about their specific exposure to, say, Gulf equity markets. Because you've been through a lot of these election cycles, you've seen presidents come and go, and you've also seen the impact on regional markets. I mean, do we need to look at it from a slightly different prism this time around?
Honestly, the field today, I mean, as we get now, it's less than a month, I think, for when this starts. The field now, it's going to be a blue wave. That's where we see a lot of the reading, a lot of the reports and how it's going to be. And the blue wave will be positive, we believe, for the markets, because what was promised by Biden and the team in terms of fiscal support, in terms of infrastructure support, all of these with a full control in the Senate and the House, they should be able to pass many of those plans going forward. So we think that will help the U.S. stock markets continue going forward. The issue, I think, or the difference this time is that if you ask some of the GCC governments about who you will want to win, they would maybe not prefer the Democrats to come back. That's the only thing. But I think in terms of if the expectations are right, if the equity markets continue to be positive after the win, then that should be good for us. But this month, it could be a bit volatile if we see some kind of surprises, unexpected surprises from the Republicans.
In your research, you also highlight a specific local catalyst, and that relates to the move by ADQ to start Q market makers to boost the liquidity on the Abu Dhabi bourse. Is that something that we can perhaps, again, use as an example, perhaps for more to come?
Yeah, I think, Yusuf, we've been talking about ADQ even in your programs over the past few months. And it seems that it's a new entity that came to the market here, where it really has a unique position of having a public, it owns Abu Dhabi government entities, and it also is getting into the private sector or in the public companies by owning the share of the Abu Dhabi government there. Now, when you create a market maker, you have access in that market maker because you are the biggest owner of government shares in the public companies in ADX, so you have the inventory of shares. They have also access to the stimulus package, to the cash that was created as a fund, $1 billion to support the market, so you have the liquidity. And you are also the owner, as being the owner of the government entities, you own ADX. So today you really have, for the first time, I think we really have in the market in the UAE, a real market maker who can really make a sizable difference. And I think if they really, and from what I see in terms of plans that are happening in other areas, if they materialize now and they really go big, creating those big contracts, this could make a difference to the ADX in terms of trading value. And we've seen how ADX trading value has been growing lately and exceeding DFM. And we think that could continue, and that could give it a good push till year end. So it could make a difference for ADX if executed properly. So we wait and watch.
Up next, with Israel back in lockdown, just how far is the central bank willing to go to support the economy? We hear from Governor Amir Yaron. This is Bloomberg.
Women leaders were actually better at controlling the deaths from COVID-19. Do you think out of this pandemic, we'll see more countries be willing to elect female leaders?
When we look at women leaders, we tend to project on them baggage that they shouldn't bear.
Women are given an opportunity when no one else wants to do the job.
Women had a very clear objective. They wanted to save lives.
The women leaders, if you look at their careers, have also built up a level of trust.
In fact,
women have to be better at communication in order to be elected as leaders, whereas this doesn't hold true for men.
We need to get those sexist stereotypes out of our head and give women a fair run for leadership.
Trying to change the stereotypes about women is not only the business of women, but men have to be part of it.
Welcome back to the best of Daybreak Middle East. The Bank of Israel says it will continue to take whatever accommodative measures are needed to support the economy. Then after the country went into a second lockdown last month, I spoke to Governor Amir Yaron.
Since the installment of the second lockdown, we are seeing improved data in terms of morbidity. The numbers are going down, and as you understand, this is essentially a risk management process. On the one hand, lowering the morbidity back so the economy can function next to the health crisis, and we are in this process of lowering the number. Right now, the decisions are basically towards next week. Which steps are we going to basically come out of this second lockdowns? The main thing that's on the plate right now are basically, as I would say, businesses that do not have customer walk-ins because they have low infection rates and very low grades or kidney problems. That's and what's essential for us relative to the first lockdown is to have a very clear path that has manages this both morbidity versus economics on the one hand. On the other hand, has clear enforcement, which we didn't do last time. Not to do it too fast. You need about 10 days to 2 weeks to see every marginal effect. So, sure.
If I may just interject, Governor, because we are a little bit pressed for time, and I do want to get to some more tangible views on monetary policy. We're running up to the committee's meeting next week. Is an expansion of some of the government bonds, is that on the table, a purchase program there because of the rising deficit?
So overall, the Bank of Israel, just like many other central bank, has proceeded with very accommodative monetary policy in many spheres, both in our QE, both in purchasing corporate bonds, giving subsidized loans to banks, subject to the conditions of basically giving credit to SMEs, lowering the rates where we were, with synergy with the supervision of the banking sector to also provide credit. That's kind of an important synergy between the two. And we will continue to do whatever accommodative measures that we need to do as we're going forward, as basically we see the balance that's needed for having what I would say a comfortable interest rate environment. And right now, this is the case, but we are continuously analyzing what else can we do in terms of providing that environment.
Governor, we have the U.S. elections that are just around the corner, and I appreciate you can't necessarily weigh in with the preferred outcome, but have you as a bank taken any additional measures to prepare for post-election volatility that might ripple through global financial markets?
We always, both when we look at our FX markets, at our investments, in terms of our reserves and just general economic outlook, take into consideration many aspects, and obviously these are also issues that we are analyzing, and it's not clear what will happen if one outcome becomes versus the other.
Quick closing thoughts on the breakthrough agreements with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. Are you expecting any more announcements, perhaps on the financial institution side of things?
Well, first of all, this is a great development. I think it provides a great opportunity for both countries. There's a lot of synergies in terms of agrotech, fintech, high-tech industries, financials, and I'm happy to say the supervisor of the banks actually was part of the leading financial part of the delegation, and we are promoting what we can so as to facilitate as transparent and ease of business as one can, so as to facilitate good economic ties that I foresee here.
Up next, Saudi retailer Extra reports a 96% increase in third quarter profit. We asked the CEO what was behind the surge. This is Bloomberg.
We explore the trends, investments, and competition of the European ETF industry. Join us on Bloomberg ETF IQ Europe.
This is Bloomberg Best, your weekly review of the most important business news, analysis, and interviews from Bloomberg Television around the world.
Ken Burns, welcome to Bloomberg Big Decisions.
We have always been a mixture of things. We are always stronger for that mixture.
Growth is a way to stay competitive, delight more and more consumers.
Welcome to the Best of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang.
They've moved the needle by acknowledging that they have to monitor the content.
What is one word of advice you'll take with you?
Learn how to listen. And that is certainly something that has served me well.
Ankiti, where do you go from here?
It's a huge market. It's a huge opportunity. I want to go 100x from here.
Our philosophy is to partner where we can and stand apart when we should.
Hi, I'm David Weston. Bloomberg Television is reinventing one of the most iconic brands in financial television for a new audience. Join me to see the news program for the clever investor. This is Bloomberg Wall Street Week.
Welcome back to the Best of Daybreak Middle East. United Electronics, the Saudi retailer, also known as Extra, this week reported profit for the third quarter of 53.2 million riyals. That's almost twice the net income from a year ago. Revenues also increased to 1.23 billion riyals. We discussed the numbers with the CEO, Mohammed Galen.
The announcement of the VATs, we were expecting a softer month in Q3. And actually, we underestimated the two facts. One, which is that the consumers in Q2, they did not spend that much money in restaurant, in fashion, in entertainment, in anything, actually. And so there was an accumulation of disposable income. That's number one. Number two, usually in the kingdom, in summer, like about 3 to 4 million of people that are traveling outside the country, and they did not happen. The third point, in my opinion, which is people went celebrating life after whole curfew and so on. And so we found in our stores that we have a double-digit growth in terms of traffic versus a year ago. And so all this was a pleasantly surprise factor for us, which drove the business in Q3.
What about your e-commerce platforms? I mean, are you going to continue expanding on that front? Are you investing more in it because of the shift from the coronavirus in terms of consumer behavior?
Yeah, that's for sure. Q2, it was a special case, of course, as you know. Our business was 31% of the total was online. However, year to date, we're about 23%. the omni-channel or the consumer, you have to give him the chance to buy offline or online. And I think the new convenience, as I say, you need to be strong offline and online, and you deliver whatever and whenever the customer is really want. And so that's an integral part of our strategy, is to move the online towards being a leader in this part of the business.
I mean, is this also a chance to use your strong balance sheets and your brand recognition in the market to take over some other peers in the industry, to amplify inorganically? Is that something on the list as you begin to look into 2021?
Actually, look, we have been very successful in the last few years in increasing our market share. And usually when we target a certain category, like the big appliances or white goods, whatever you call it, for example, we had a 25% compounded growth in such a category. And we did this by huge availability. We are the #1 almost retailer in white goods that available in 25 cities in Saudi. All my competition is really regional. And so by focusing on different channels and focusing on certain categories, we are able to increase our market share and our footfall around the Saudi Arabia.
What about on the operational expense side of things? Are you confident you'll be able to hold on to your current employee staff base? And are you perhaps looking to hire even more, given your particular situation?
Look, when the uncertainty happened, the #1 concern for every employee is what will happen tomorrow for us. And so strategically in March, we announced for all our employees at this time that we are not going to do any layoffs during this period. And that's gained a lot of passion and loyalty for the company. And that was very important. Why? Because #1, now we are expanding and we are investing in certain part of the business like the online. And also we are expanding in terms of our business on the consumer financing. And so our headcounts are increasing. And on the other side, our SG&A is going down. And so we are doing this because we are gaining market share day after day. And so if you look to Q3 specifically, you will find that 120 basis points of our expenses was down versus a year ago. And so regarding the human capital for us is the most important thing, because our business is about people, actually.
So in the coming hours, we're going to have Apple unveil their new iPhones, and it's a product that is immensely popular in the kingdom as well. I mean, how critical a catalyst is a product like that for you as you try and capitalize on your position in the market?
Yeah, look, that's a very important launch for everybody, actually. And actually, it's a swing because initially they launch every Q3, and they did not launch Q3. And so that will be a good boost for Q4, and we are anxiously looking for that. Because our industry is driven by two things, actually. It is the right demographics and the macroeconomics and the new launches and the initiatives. And so with every new technology, we find that our business is going in the right direction. And so we're really looking forward for a breakthrough. We hope for a breakthrough in terms of the new device.
What else could be sort of a development that could unlock more value into your stock price? Because, I mean, you're off your record highs just a little bit overall. Analysts seem to be a little bit more divided in terms of the outlook for the stock. I mean, how can you reassure investors there's still a lot more to come from Extra over 2021 and beyond?
Look, very important. With a very small analysis of the Saudi demographic, we find that 50% is less than 24 years old. And this is an exact number. And 20% are less than 9 years old. And so these people will be for the first time buyer to mobile, tablet. Also, they are going to get married. And so they are going to buy appliances. And so you can find the hiccups in the short term, but the overall, the trend is up in Saudi Arabia.
A new U.S. election poll out on Thursday showed that Joe Biden held an 11-point lead over President Trump as November 3rd nears. We got more with Paul Gambles. He's the co-founder and managing partner at MBMG Group.
The four risks that we see that we just don't think are being priced in are: one, that, let's say, stimulus deal doesn't happen; two, there's a contested election; three, there's second economic wave after the election. But also, you know, the thing with a Democrat sweep is it raises the specter of a big tech breakup. And if we see anything that's an existential threat to FANGs in the form they are now, you know, not only does that hurt tech, that also, you know, it hurts broader markets because obviously we've had so much leadership from FANGs. So I think there are a lot of uncertainties that are not being priced into risk assets. And conversely, we'd argue they're maybe not being priced into anti-fragile assets either, which is why we've been buying gold miners again recently, why we've built up some of the treasury exposure again recently. So I think you actually want to be positioned with a really strong kind of anti-fragile bent to your portfolio going into November, just because, you know, uncertainty has probably never been greater than it is right now. This presidential combined with COVID, combined with after effects of COVID, I think this is off the scale in terms of, you know, unknown unknowns. So, yeah, if we get the dip, let's have a look at it. That's what we did at the end of last month, and we took the view that stimulus might be coming. That was a reason to buy. Another dip, well, let's see. It's not an automatic buy.
Now, the folks at Schroders, they make the point that the U.S. curve is going to flatten regardless of who takes over at the White House. They're going to steepen the curve. GTV Go for our clients for the additional context. They're joining a growing number of peers. And basically, you've got the inevitability of massive fiscal stimulus, and then you've got of course, pressure that would put on some of the yields in terms of the longer dated versus the front part of the curve. What do you penciled in for U.S. 10s in sort of the medium term?
I think that 10s are reasonably well anchored, and although we could see some short-term move up, we think 10s are a buy. We think the longer end of the curve is an even greater buy because whatever happens in the election, whatever happens in policy, actually the thing that really drives the long end of the curve is economic activity. And as I say, our view is that 2021 is more likely to be much harder than people are expecting, and therefore we think lower curve and flatter curve is likely to happen at some point, but with quite a bit of volatility on the way there for exactly the reasons that you just outlined.
Up next, Moody's warns that Saudi Arabia may not be able to rely on Aramco's huge dividends beyond next year unless oil prices increase. How will the kingdom contain its fiscal deficit? This is Bloomberg.
Market that over the past few weeks has made it clear it wants to go higher. It got a little spooked by the idea that geopolitical tensions are rising.
Some things you see coming, some things you don't. The trick is to be ready for anything. John from Infrastructure Support is working every day to keep essential market data flowing seamlessly. We keep on so you can keep on.
valuations, particularly, sort of the technology landscape, have gotten to some pretty extraordinary levels. So I think it's not a surprise. I don't think it's any indication of the beginning of the end, but I do think markets don't like uncertainty.
Welcome back to the Best of Daybreak Middle East. Saudi Arabia may not be able to rely on annual dividends of almost $75 billion from the state oil company Saudi Aramco beyond next year unless crude prices increase. Well, that's according to a new report from Moody's, and it comes after the kingdom published an overview of its spending for the next 3 years, and that envisages annual cuts to help contain the fiscal deficit. We got more with Ahmed Badr. He's the Middle East Managing Director at Credit Suisse.
I think, first of all, we have to differentiate between what's happening in the economy, and I think, again, the Moody's report portrays it very well, and it really comes as no surprise at all. And if anything, I don't think the Saudi government has had their head in the sand or something. So actually, there's been a lot of stimulus plans and cuts in place in order to tackle the economic situation. However, the real question is this actually filtering through the market, the stock market? And the answer is no. So still we see a bit of disconnect between the actual stock market performance and the economic reality on the ground, as we mentioned before.
So where does that leave us on the banks, for example? Because that's a highlight in your research, and ultimately, there appear to be signs of strength there, or at least resilience.
I think the whole market has been resilient, right? And it has been mainly on local buying. And again, if you look at the index and the banks, there is not much difference in terms of the outperformance compared to other MENA markets. And it's really, if you look at the liquidity and you look at the inflows from locals, they have been basically holding the market. Again, with the U.S. stimulus in place, with U.S. markets also being very strong, we still do not have an excuse for this market to basically correct. But again, if you look at the banks or in general, or even petchems, fundamentally, things are still quite detached from economic reality. So if anything, we have been calling it, we've been wrong for a while now simply because the market has been held up, but we actually are calling it fundamentally. We think that the market needs to sell off, needs to correct from here. It's too expensive.
So does that include some of the petrochem favorites that in the past were the darlings of investors like SABIC?
Listen, so with oil where it is, and I don't think anyone estimates oil to basically go up significantly from here, I think petchems will continue to suffer, and definitely SABIC is the most obvious one. Let's put it this way.
Let's turn to the United Arab Emirates, because, again, you highlight this divergence between banks and between real estate. And yes, the gap might be growing, but you're also seeing now growing value in a blue chip like Emaar. Just run me through what the narrative, what the thinking at Credit Suisse is right this moment.
So I think, again, the issue with Emaar, and I've been on the show several times basically saying it's too cheap, it's too cheap. We think the upside, the risk is on the upside. However, actually this call has been wrong. And with the negative sentiment now, with the news in Arab tech, which is again filtering through the market, I think it's very difficult to justify a positive catalyst. I'm actually happy to say that we were wrong in terms of a bullish call. I do not see currently any positive catalyst, even with the valuation being attractive. That said, if you look at the banks, that will definitely filter through. So we look at all the banks, there's a lot of exposure to real estate, and even if it's not really what's happening in terms of loan quality, you will say that you can argue that there is not going to be very significant loan growth, if any. Let's put it this way. So the banks are not really going to be performing well.
I mean, Ahmed, the other concern is around Arab tech, and you just mentioned it, but I want to flesh it out because over a bit more than a decade of doing this now, I have never seen a state kind of involved entity like Arab tech. I mean, they had quite a bit of government involvement, just left to go bankrupt. To what extent does this change the dynamics, perhaps, of construction in the UAE, of how the government looks at these businesses?
Listen, you have to look at what's happening on the ground, right? So Arab tech is two things. It's a reflection of a weak construction sector. Obviously, there's been a lot of receivables that are piling up and all this, and you don't see a lot of new products coming online. But there was also, let's say, a lot of I don't want to call it mismanagement, but the company hasn't been greatly managed since the crisis, and we haven't seen really that improvement. So basically, those coupled, you do not have a viability for Arab tech's business. Now, does that basically filter through the market in terms of negative sentiment? The answer is yes. Would you say, you know what, the government needs to step in to save Arab tech? I think that's really an economic decision, and I don't think it is the right one to do so.
We also had some inflation numbers out of Egypt, accelerating 3.7% in September. That's for the urban part of the consumer price index. The food prices fell. It's an interesting picture that's beginning to emerge there. And then your foreign currency reserves show strength and relative resilience. Is there still a strong value proposition to some of the Egyptian assets, given the rally that they've had? And I'm thinking specifically around bonds.
I think Egyptian credits remains to be very attractive. If anything, it is actually the most, or one of the most attractive and emerging as we speak. Again, the way the central bank has been able to beef up the reserves and hold it steady, and we see actually on the ground consumer spending really coming back aggressively with interest rates where they are. So any investor who is actually in search for yield, I think Egypt is looking very attractive here.
It's nothing short of astounding, the amount of investment that's going into infrastructure. I mean, roads and bridges and new developments popping out left and right. Is there anything else outside of the credit play in Egypt right now that you're telling clients to look at?
So listen, the consumer story in Egypt, the consumer stocks continue to be attractive. The issue you have in the Egyptian stock market in general is liquidity, and that's why I think actually the exposure to the credit story would actually give you better results than the equity story as we speak. But I actually agree with you in terms of infrastructure investing. I think it is quite amazing what you see on the ground now, and I've seen it myself as well a couple of months ago.
The COVID crisis is hitting global gas demand. The estimated annual growth rate for 2020 to 2024 has now been cut to 1.5%, and that compares to pre-COVID forecasts of 1.8%. And that's according to the Arab Petroleum Investments Corporation, which is better known as APICOR. We got more with Leila bin Ali. She's the chief economist, head of strategy, energy economics, and sustainability.
I think we have some good news as far as gas is concerned, and after a wave of capex reductions in the energy sector and a wave of forecasts where that have been reduced because of COVID-19 and the pandemic, and I think that's for a purpose, because this is a crisis where you have the highest synchronization ever and the deterioration of multiple metrics across the board. And one area where you definitely could see that is in the gas and petrochemical sector, given the nature of the products that we are selling from that sector. But here we are from the Middle East and North Africa. It's a region where, compared to the rest of the world, we have seen actually an increase in planned investments in the gas sector. And some of the drivers are definitely related to the continuation of increase in the gas demand in the region, and the fact that you will have, I think from the gas and petrochemical side, an increase in need for that. But there's also some strategic drivers that we want to capture in our report, and the fact that these players in this region want to position themselves in the next wave, in the next cycle of investments in the future.
And we see the Qataris doing that quite aggressively, because about 70% of planned investments up to 2024 are coming from Qatar. How much of that will come from non-state investors?
Right, that's another trend that we are tracking in our investments outlook, is the share of the private sector. And it's true that this year, let's say compared to last year, we've seen a small decrease, but there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is that projects are becoming bigger. And you're right to mention